Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 1, Episode 6, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. Well, by now, I'm sure everyone has heard about this being a possible ripoff of an Ursula Le Guin short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, written in the early 1970s. I believe it was 1973. And so, of course, what did I do? I had to go find the story and read it so that I could give you my opinion of this. First, I will start by giving you a synopsis of the Strange New Worlds episode. The Enterprise is in the Magellan system. It's some sort of mapping mission, and they come across a shuttle that's under attack from a cruiser. They manage to get the captives from the shuttle onto the Enterprise. It's a man and his son. The son has been selected to be the first servant. They are on their way to the Ascension ceremony. Captain Pike apparently knows the woman who is, I guess she seemed to be the de facto leader of this planet. He had met her 10 years earlier when she was having a situation with the shuttle she was in. So they spend the entire episode trying to protect this child from being kidnapped by this other colony before he can be ascended. And during this time, Pike has a romantic relationship with this woman from this planet. And Dr. Mbenga and his daughter, they get to know the father and the first servant. The other story going on during this was Uhura and La'an, Uhura being on her security rotation under La'an. There was some interesting character development, at least with Dr. Mbenga and his daughter, and also what went on between La'an and Uhura. I mean, initially, the La'an stuff really irritated me because usually insecure people tend to be the most defensive, shall we say? And that's just the vibe I get coming off of that character. Nothing to do with the actress, it's the writing causing that.
The character, the Ortega's character and Discount Drummer. Those characters, I'm now going to commit and say those are garbage characters. I could have gone along with Uhura learning a different field, as part of a rotation to get a well-rounded experience. But every time Discount Drummer's on the screen, she's like grumping around, and all it is she's putting on an air of intimidation.
Yeah.
It's not like that's who she is. She's putting on an air of intimidation.
Well, she's running around acting like a bitch. There's a difference between being a bitch and having command presence. Bitches, again, nobody respects you when you're just a bitch. They just don't want to be near you because they don't want to put up with your bullshit. Whereas when you actually respect someone, you value their leadership skills, that's command presence. And she does not have that.
If they got rid of Discount Drummer, I think the series would be better for it. And if they got rid of Ortegas, because if I'm remembering correctly, I believe Ortegas was lipping off at the beginning of this episode.
But that's all she does. Again, this is another poorly written character. I am so fed up with the crappy writing. And I guess that brings me to my next point. And I'll save the Dr. Mbenga stuff for last because it has to do with the rest of the story. Pike having a relationship with this woman the way that he did, that was creepy to me. Not to mention when he's on the bridge, it feels like he's like the professor and everybody else on the bridge is a cadet. I mean, there's a weird dynamic going on there. This does not feel like an adult starship.
This feels like he's on a training cruise.
Yeah.
Where he's the only experienced professional. I mean, maybe Una is a teacher as well, a professional. But everybody else is like a student. Like this is a training mission, a simulator or something where they're learning. Because nobody else outside of those two, I have zero faith that they're capable of doing their jobs at the highest level.
No.
They're still learning on the job. And I agree with you. It feels like they're on a training mission where Pike and maybe Una, like those are the only two professionals on the ship.
Yeah, so I mean, while all this is going on, Spike's down there scoring with this Magellan woman. Really?
Well, it's funny because some people would defend that. See, you wanted TOS-like things, there you go. Yeah, but isn't this whole franchise is supposed to be showing us how taking Star Trek into the 21st century? And I don't know, to me, betting somebody in a James Bond mindset. Like when Kirk did it in the original series, that was part of that James Bond mindset where it just was a sign of the times of when the show was made. It's 2022 now. He's betting somebody who he did, was it 10 years ago? I forget.
10. Yeah, it was 10.
Like, what are you doing? I don't know. Just from the writing point of view, they keep trying to lecture us during these CBS series about how we should be acting. And because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to take this as this was just toxic masculinity spilling over or like what they were doing here. It to me, it felt out of place for the Pike character.
Yep.
But whatever. I mean, you could make the argument, oh, it's just a throwback to TOS days and like with Kirk betting. And it's like, whatever. I mean, then don't lecture me about how you're doing stuff better in quotation marks than then. Because, I mean, I didn't mind the betting scene other than these shows get so pretentious about lecturing us on the proper behavior of how people should act. And then they do something like this, and I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Usually outsiders aren't allowed into this ceremony of the ascension of the first servant. But because Pike was friends with this woman, and maybe that's why they had him in this weird relationship with her, so that he could actually get in to see the real ascension. Although I think they could have written that differently to accomplish the same thing. So I'm not going to give them a pass on that. And so when he finally does witness the ascension, as it turns out, what they're doing is this first servant, this child who appears to be like 10 years old, is actually hooked up to a giant machine that runs this civilization. It appears to be a utopia on the outside, but obviously when you see that it's run on the life of a child that's hooked up to these machines, and you see the dried up husk of the previous child being carted out of there, it's obvious that this is actually quite ugly. So when Pike sees what they are doing with these children, one after another, to run this civilization, he is horrified, and he tries to stop it. But then it's explained to him that it's too late, that the kid would just die anyway if he tried to unhook the kid. Then, of course, he gets this speech about, we have one child suffering on our planet. How many do you have on yours? Kind of crap. I've seen people pointing out, well, at this point in the future in Star Trek, there shouldn't even be suffering children anyway on Earth. I mean, so again, this is more of the social preaching that we get from this show, like this. I don't know. I mean, I don't even know who they're talking to at this point, because the admonishments that they are giving out, I don't know who they're talking to. It's like, yeah, okay, so we've got suffering children in our current society, because I think that was the point they were actually trying to make. But I don't understand why they are preaching down to the audience. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand what they're doing there. Like, yelling at people who are just those who sit in their living rooms watching this crap. What do they think they're accomplishing?
I don't know if I took it necessarily as preaching. I think that the writers just wanted to put that line in there so they sounded profound.
Yeah.
In the timeline we're in now, with Pike's era, we should be having, at least on Earth, all that eugenics war, all that World War III stuff should be behind us. So we should be entering that, well, not entering, we should be well established into that
post-scarcity.
Yes, the post-scarcity situation. So there shouldn't be children suffering. And I've heard some people say, no, they were referring back to the past.
They weren't. No, they weren't.
The verb tense that was being used was a current verb tense, not a past verb tense.
That is correct.
So I don't think that's at all true. I didn't get offended like it was preaching. I just thought the writer stuck it in there as just to sound smart, or to try to hammer home. But again, one needs to realize, I say this yet again, this is a children's show.
Yeah.
So hammering it home like that is what you would do in a children's show. So that's what they did here. And I'm going to say this yet one more time. This is not an episodic show. At the beginning of this episode, they brought up the stuff with Pike dealing with his past, so that the audience would know in this episode, because Pike has a conversation with that lady, and it has to do with his future that he saw. This is a continued personal arc going on with Pike.
Yep.
Every video that this applies to, I'm going to say this. This is not an episodic show. If it was, they wouldn't need to say previously on, and you wouldn't carry those character traits. Him and his future, that is an arc going through the whole season.
Yep. Yeah, it is. Now, Dr. Mbenga and the father of the first servant. As it turns out, it was the father of the first servant who had been making arrangements to try to have the first servant, his son, kidnapped repeatedly to try to get him out of that situation. And he was using help from a nearby colony of people who had left Majalis because they didn't agree with what was being done with his first servant child being used to run their society. And obviously the father failed. His son ascended, and there was nothing he could do for him at that point. However, he requested that he be taken to the colony of people who had left Majalis. He also offered to do what he can to help Dr. Mbenga's daughter as far as her health condition is concerned. He told Dr. Mbenga that it would not be a cure, but it would help him on the way to finding a cure. Because maybe not obviously, but the first servant's father was a doctor. So, I mean, that's basically how it ended. This was by far the best episode so far this season of Strange New Worlds. However, the problem is the Ursula Le Guin story, the ones who walk away from Omelas. And this Star Trek Strange New Worlds episode was eerily similar to that, to the point where I think the writers on this episode probably took the Le Guin story, put their own spin on it, and called it theirs.
By itself, at least my personal opinion, I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is they don't give credit.
Yep.
This is what bothers me with this show. This whole CBS stuff, all these Star Treks, one of their common things that they keep doing is trying to, push more female characters into the forefront. And this is the second female author that they've either borrowed or stolen from. Because DC Fontana, a few episodes ago, they did the same thing with her novel from the 80s.
And they didn't give credit.
It's like, if you're trying to make a show to lift up female voices, wouldn't you not only want to give credit, but like at the very beginning of the episode, plaster that right in the middle? Ursula Le Guin or DC Fontana.
Yep.
This is based on one of their works. Like, wouldn't you want to promote that? So I don't understand what they're doing. It's okay to borrow stuff from things. That has happened all the time. Remember when Harlan Ellison went after James Cameron for the Terminator movie for his Outer Limit episodes, The Soldier and The Demon with the Glass Hand?
Yes.
And so I think eventually the compromise was on the VHS tapes. They gave credit to Harlan Ellison for that. And that was kind of an adversarial type thing. But these Star Treks are supposed to be teaching us, remember, us audience is stupid about how much females have contributed to all this genre. And I'm using that with tongue-in-cheek, because this genre, I think a lot of us are very aware of how much females have contributed to this field. But then you have two giants like DC Fontana and Ursula Le Guin, and they don't even give credit. They're not even text credit at the very ending. I mean, I would even do more than that. I would put it at the beginning and put it in big freaking letters.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would have done too.
Had they had done that, this adaptation that they did, I agree with you. This was easily the best of Strange New Worlds. I would argue this was easily the best of any of the Alex Kurtzman Star Trek live action stuff.
Yeah, because the Ursula Le Guin story is a 4-page short story. It starts out describing a summer festival. It talks about how idyllic the society is, but then it tells you about the dirty little secret of the child kept in a basement closet. Because of this child being kept in the closet, that's what keeps their society run in an orderly fashion, the suffering of this one child. And that just about everybody in their society goes and looks upon the child at some point in time, and that most people, I guess, are okay with it eventually, or just learn to live with it, but that there are some people who see it and immediately just turn around, walk out of the city, and they never see these people again. And that's the premise of her story, which is, wow, oddly similar to this episode of Strange New Worlds, to the point where, as I said, I think that they took that base Le Guin story, because, I mean, if you're writing science fiction, you sure as hell have better read this at some point in your education before you're writing TV episodes, that's for sure.
This isn't a minor author.
No.
Much like I said a few episodes ago when I talked about DC Fontana. These aren't minor people. These are giants. If they're educating us about how much females have contributed to this field, and they have, why don't they themselves seem to treat these people with reverence?
Because I think, and here's my opinion of this, especially since, we've got the first black captain of a starship or whatever, and it's like, okay, so I guess Deep Space Nine, Sisko wasn't a captain of a starship. He was first...
But he was.
Eventually...
When he got the Defiant and he went from Commander Sisko to Captain Sisko, he absolutely was a captain of a starship.
Yeah, but then they completely and utterly neglect to mention that he even existed. Like, these people, they have to be the first of everything, and in order to do that, they are actually erasing the contributions of minorities who've come before. Whether it be women or people of color, they have no problem erasing them to make themselves first.
Yeah, but especially with DC Fontana. She was Star Trek. She's one of the people credited for creating what Star Trek is today in the early days. So you would think you'd lift her as high as you possibly could. And Ursula Le Guin, she's a giant in the genre. This isn't a minor author that you're finding, hey, I'm going to dig through the garbage bin at the bookstore and just start ripping off some people left and right. This is a huge person. This is somebody you wouldn't want to rip off. You'd want to say, no, I'm going to adapt what they did, and I'm going to give them full credit so that maybe you'll go and, like we did, and investigate the short story.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that, and this is just my thoughts on this because I'm kind of an ass, but maybe these current writers don't realize that DC Fontana was a woman because she went by DC.
Well, she did that on purpose because back
at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the time it was not advantageous to be a woman in that field. Well, in much of any fields, for that matter, let's be honest. But it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't know that that was a woman. And it bothers me a great deal that they don't give other writers credit when they do borrow. Even if they do put their own spin on it enough that it's not a copyright infringement, although I would argue that if I was Le Guin's estate, I might be looking at some legal action here.
Yeah, I'd want to do a Harlan Ellison and go after these people just to say, look, you've got to start giving people credit. Even if they don't want any money, you're gonna do this. You're gonna start putting credit. When you start borrowing stuff, you're gonna start putting credit on there.
Well, it's interesting because we can't even use a short video clip of their crappy show on YouTube without getting nailed with some copyright bullshit, when that actually is within fair use to use because we are doing a critical commentary on it. Yet these assholes basically steal the entire story, don't give any credit, and they just get away with it. Which tells you something about the power structure, at least in the United States, as far as who's allowed to break the law and who can't even get the law to protect them. I'm fed up with this crap.
If you don't give credit, it's plagiarism. If you give credit, but it's an adaptation, that's okay. It's not like I'm saying you can't do that. They have done that many, 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 many times. Not these people, but I mean in the past, other franchises and other showrunners. But you have to give based on an idea of this short story.
Yep.
Just do that. Even if you have to pay the estate some money, I don't know. It seems like that's great advertisement. If you can have Ursula Le Guin's name tied to your product, that's nothing but a positive thing.
Yeah.
It gives your property instant credibility in the genre.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I hadn't read the Le Guin story before, but obviously to do my research for this review, I sat down and I read the story. And the 4-page Le Guin story, I think, was far more profound than that entire, 40 to 50 minutes that I watched of Strange New Worlds. Because when she is describing this child in this closet locked in the basement, I don't know what her intentions were. I didn't look further into this, but at least my interpretation was that this could be anything from literal to figurative, being, you're locking the truth away. Nobody speaks the truth, or even so much as your inner desires being locked away to keep an orderly society, or even your inner child being locked away so that society can be this near utopia. I mean, there are so many things that could have been allegory for. As I said, I didn't look into seeing if it was written somewhere what her actual intention was. But that made me think so much more than that Strange New Worlds episode. And it's because the Strange New Worlds episode, the thing that I don't like about a lot of writers these days is that they feel the need to fill in every single last detail so that there is no interpretation left.
That's the generation they're writing for, though. Again, I've said this in several videos, but the younger millennials and the Zoomers, they have a real problem with letting pieces not be explained. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is just the boomers and the late Gen Xers that are writing this stuff, and maybe they can't let it go.
Earliest Gen Xers.
The earliest. Well, depending on how you want to look at it.
Well, the earliest Gen Xers would be the oldest ones.
Yes, good point. I don't know if it's just a problem there or if it's the audience, but that's why, like, when they make a prequel in Star Wars for Han Solo, nobody needed to know the backstory for Han Solo. Not a single person needed to know that. It was nice to just keep it as a mystery in the background. Or what Chibnall did with Doctor Who and tried to give a origin for the Doctor. Mm-hmm. You don't need that. You don't need that. Part of the fun of the Doctor was that mysterious past that he had.
Yep.
And by filling in the blanks, you're robbing that mythos of that mystery. Some things you don't need to explain. And an interpretation like this, wouldn't it have been a lot nicer to just keep that open-ended? The way the story was told on Star Trek was Strange New Worlds. It seemed like it was one-sided, meaning you're supposed to walk away from this going, this was a horrible thing that was being done. That's how I walked away from it.
Yeah.
I didn't understand why this society was even doing this. I mean, because wasn't it like the phrase that was said was, if this child doesn't do this, like the city will fall out of the sky. And I wasn't sure if that was a literal, like somehow it would just fall out of the sky and hit the ground.
Well, I think the thing is that I think it was meant to be literal, but Pike didn't understand that, or whoever it was that they were talking to, and I don't even remember at this point. But I think they took it figuratively. I don't think they understood that it really meant that their society would come to an end.
So there's a little bit of that interpretation that you were talking about.
Yes, but at least in my opinion, I just feel like it would have been better if they left more room for interpretation at the end as far as what this child was actually going through. I mean, the Le Guin story was very obvious. She described in graphic detail this child being locked in this closet. But I think to get the same story across in the same way visually, it had to have been done differently. Because when you write something, it's open to interpretation as far as what the words actually mean. Visually, however, when you show a child hooked up to a machine, there is no interpretation left there. There is a literal child being hooked up to a literal machine. However, if this had all been behind closed doors and Pike hadn't actually gotten to see what really happened, just that the child went into this closet and never came out again, that would have been much more interesting because that would have left us something to talk about, what was really going on behind those closed doors, instead of it being, here you go, this is exactly what this is. But this also comes back to, I think that, not only are we strip mining our entertainment from the past in order to just make a buck off of the name of the franchise, but I think there are people out there who don't want any kind of interpretation to take place. They only want literal word of an authority figure, and that's what it is, so that you don't actually get to think about anything for yourself. And I think that's my biggest problem with this stuff. There's no interpretation left. There's no thinking left. And like I complained in an earlier review, I watch Star Trek so that I can think. And this stuff isn't making me think. In fact, after reading this short story, the one episode that kind of almost made me think, well, sorry, it pales in comparison to this 4-page short story written in the early 70s. I don't even know what to say anymore.
I think there was a little bit of interpretation at the end there. You you had that other planet that was similar to I did not read the short story, but I went with the conveyance that you gave me. Mm-hmm. The other planet was the people who walked away from that. And so there was a little bit of, well, there's this group that thinks this isn't right.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It seemed like it was, you were sitting there watching it, being told what to think, and then when it was over, it was over.
Yeah.
Now, I want to add some pieces of trivia for this episode because I think it's at least worth mentioning. One is was it First Servant? Was that the...
Yes, the First Servant.
That was the same actor, if you've watched our Expanse videos, that child that died and then those creatures brought him back with the proto-molecule. That was the same actor. And actually, he did a good job in both of those roles.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel bad for that kid because in both of those, he was...
basically killed.
Yeah, being killed in both of those. So the kid's getting typecast as a kid who gets killed off. So I don't know if he's going to be like Kenny from the early days of South Park or what. And secondly, and this one's just more of a ha-ha than anything else, those guards that were on that planet with their staffs, when they were running around and then you saw those staffs, I was thinking of the Jaffa from Stargate.
Oh,
in fact, I was referring, as we were watching the episode, I was saying to you, yeah, what about those Jaffa over there? Because it just felt like it was the Jaffa from the Stargate SG-1 series.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think they stole from that. I mean, I'm not going to rule it out either, but I just thought that was funny.
They've probably seen it, though, and that probably influenced what they did there, even if it was just the visual crew who did that interpretation for costumes and things like that.
It's like, where's Teal'c? Where's Teal'c
at?
Yeah,
exactly.
He's the leader of you guys, right? Where's Teal'c at?
Yeah. I'm so depressed because, like, just about everything these days is just such shit. They can't even give us entertainment to help us escape that.
No. I will reiterate what you said earlier in this review. I think this easily is the most Star Trek-y thing that they made. CBS Secret Hideout. However, I think that felt that way because they borrowed or stole from an actual big-name writer.
Yeah.
But this is the first one I'm going to say maybe you should try to get a hold of and watch, because this was the closest you're going to see for Star Trek, I think, in a long... I think this is probably it, but we'll see. Yeah. Maybe they'll steal from
who knows who they steal from next week, yeah. And the other thing is, I'd say, okay, you know what? Watch this episode and also get yourself a copy of that Ursula Le Guin story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, and give that a read. And
it's only 4 or 5 pages.
It's 4 pages long, yeah. So, I mean, give that a read and compare the two stories for yourself, because I'd be very interested to hear other people's interpretations of this. One other thing I'd like to say, if you like what we're doing and you want us to keep doing it, please, 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 if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. The way YouTube works these days is that you have to have 1,000 subscribers in order to get monetized. I mean, there's also, like, watch hour requirements and things like that. We made that a while ago.
We easily got the watch hours.
But we have not hit the 1,000 subscribers. And I'll be honest with you guys, it takes probably about 8 hours to produce one of these reviews for you guys. Between the watching, the recording, the editing, putting together the video, yada, yada, yada. I mean, it takes like 8 hours. And I really need to start seeing some return on that time investment, especially the way that gas prices are right now, among other things, like rent, skyrocketed. So if you're not subscribed and you want us to keep doing this, please, 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 please hit the subscribe button.
And if you like a video that we did, share it off somewhere. Facebook, Reddit, wherever you have access to share it off, because the more people that know about this channel, the quicker we can grow, and the quicker we can grow, the more content we can make, because we have ideas about doing other things and upping our production standards, but the way it is now, I mean, we need the channel to grow for that to happen. So please do help us grow. Yeah,
because software costs money, microphones cost money, everything freaking costs money. Hell, you gotta even pay for water these days. So, yeah. If you like our stuff, subscribe, share it, comment, just interact, and give us at least a little bit of a confidence boost to keep doing this. Because some days it just is really hard. So anyway, I don't want to be all depressing there. Thank you guys who have subscribed, and those of you who watch us regularly and comment. We really do appreciate it. So definitely keep up the good work.
I'm getting to know the regulars in our comments now, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That means we have people who are reliably revisiting the videos on our channel. So thank you for doing that.
Yep. So I guess now I need to record the Orville video. We'll get that up as soon as that one's done, too. So, thank you, guys.
Take care.